A 7-year-old girl looked the CEO straight in the eyes and asked, "Are you the queen?" And in just 3 minutes, she changed an entire company. But when the world discovered the little girl was actually the CEO's secret daughter, they turned a child into a scandal. Would a mother who once gave up her child have the courage to stand up and protect her, even if it meant losing her everything? And if this story touches your heart, don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the next heartfelt stories about fathers, mothers, and those who choose to love, even when it's the hardest thing to do. Ethan Barnes crouched in the lobby of Ashworth Group, adjusting the frayed strap of Rosie's small pink backpack, brushing a loose curl from her cheek as she clutched her threadbare bunny like a knight guarding her kingdom. "Just wait here for a little while, sweetheart, okay?" She nodded, wide-eyed, that brave nod children give when they don't fully understand what waiting costs adults. Inside, Ethan's second-hand shirt scratched against his skin as he tried to smooth the creases with trembling palms. A manila folder tucked under one arm like the last shield of hope he carried after too many nights reheating leftover soup for dinner. At the front desk, Rosie swung her feet as she drew rainbows on a scrap of paper, whispering to herself that Daddy would get the job because he makes food taste like sunshine. Just as Ethan disappeared into the elevator, a figure walked past, heels tapping with quiet authority. Victoria Hale, the woman whose decisions could change the course of companies in a single breath. Rosie's eyes followed her, tilting her head, whispering, "That's the queen of the castle." Victoria paused, glanced down, met Rosie's curious gaze, and for a moment, her fortress of composure cracked. She almost smiled before stepping into the lift, wondering why that child's eyes made her feel seen in a way the mirrored boardrooms never had. Upstairs, Ethan faced the harsh eyes of HR, trying to prove that a single father could still be dependable, stable, worth the risk, while downstairs, Rosie's rainbow drawing fluttered to the floor, a single line of pink crayon smudging across the marble, as if marking the place where everything, quietly and irrevocably, was about to change. Victoria Hale stepped off the elevator onto the executive floor, the echo of Rosie's innocent question still clinging to her like a whisper she couldn't shake. The queen of the castle. She had spent her life building walls of glass and steel, calculating risk, crushing softness to keep the empire unshaken. Yet a child's eyes had pierced it in seconds. She reviewed Ethan's file with a meticulous, almost cold precision in her office, the city skyline stretching endlessly beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows. Culinary operations manager, an unconventional position for a company like Ashworth, but Victoria had always believed even titans needed nourishment, that food could be more than sustenance. It could be a language of morale, even hope. She remembered long nights during the pandemic when she ordered warm soup for exhausted staff, seeing tears in the eyes of men who had survived mergers but crumbled before a bowl of comfort they hadn't known they needed. She turned a page and paused at the handwritten proposal Ethan had submitted, colorful sketches outlining low-cost, high-nutrition menus, designed not just to feed but to brighten the lives of overworked employees. A single father, a risk in corporate terms, but she found herself wondering if the real risk was turning away from people who showed up even when life pushed them down. She asked her assistant to bring Ethan to her office immediately. Downstairs, Ethan sat gripping the edges of his chair, afraid he had violated some unspoken policy, that Rosie speaking to the CEO would end the fragile chance he had fought so hard to grasp. When he entered, Victoria studied him carefully, seeing not desperation, but a quiet, stubborn hope that felt oddly familiar. "Mr. Barnes," she began, her voice calm, measured. "Tell me, what were you thinking bringing your daughter to a corporate interview?" Ethan swallowed, choosing honesty over the practiced lines he had prepared. "Her sitter canceled. I could have rescheduled, but I didn't want to teach Rosie that when life throws a wrench, you walk away." Victoria blinked, the edges of her defenses fraying as she recalled nights she spent alone, sacrificing birthdays, family dinners, all to prove she was unbreakable in a world eager to doubt her worth. "And what lesson would she have learned if you failed today?" "Echo," she challenged. Ethan met her eyes steady. "That her father showed up, even when it was hard." Silence settled between them, heavy yet strangely gentle. Victoria closed the folder, exhaling. "You didn't pass HR's initial filter." Ethan nodded, pain flickering across his face before he masked it. Because I'm a single parent. Because they see risk, Victoria corrected. But sometimes risk is the only path to real change. She stood looking down at him, not with judgment, but with a quiet, testing respect. 2 weeks, paid trial, our executive kitchen. You'll design and execute a wellness-focused menu. Show me what your colored sketches can do. Ethan's breath caught, then steadied. Thank you, he said softly, clutching the folder closer. The promise of a second chance shimmering between them like dawn breaking after too many cold nights. Ethan Barnes stepped into the executive kitchen of Ashworth Group at dawn, the scent of disinfectant and cold steel greeting him like a test he could not afford to fail. Rosie's sleepy wave from the lobby replayed in his mind, a reminder of why he stood here, in a crisp chef's jacket, with his name stitched awkwardly on the chest. Around him, sous chefs and kitchen coordinators eyed him with guarded curiosity. The single dad with a kid downstairs, the charity case, the risk. Ethan did not flinch. He unfurled his color-coded prep sheet on the stainless steel counter, each section marked with bright highlights. Blue for low sodium, yellow for energy-boosting ingredients, pink for mood-lifting plating options. Good morning, he began, steady, as if he belonged here, as if the knot in his stomach was just hunger. Today we're shifting Tuesday's menu to Mediterranean, high-protein, low-sodium hummus bowls, grilled chicken skewers, vibrant plating, and quick prep rotations. Let's make food that feels like hope. A scoff came from Tony, a young sous chef with sharp eyes and a sharper tongue. Didn't realize we were running a preschool cafeteria now. A couple of snickers followed, the sound of cynicism that workplaces often mistake for strength. Ethan met Tony's gaze without anger, only calm. If you can prep a hummus bowl that makes an analyst forget her 14th hour of work, I'll let you rename the dish anything you want. That silenced the room. They began, slowly, the rhythm of chopping, searing, and seasoning filling the kitchen with life. As the hours passed, the scent of citrus and rosemary, the bright greens of parsley, and the jewel tones of roasted peppers replaced the sterile coldness of the room. Ethan moved among them, correcting a slice here, adjusting seasoning there, explaining how color on a plate could lift morale, how taste could be memory, how warmth could fight the quiet fatigue no HR memo ever addressed. By midday, the plates were ready. Citrus-glazed chicken skewers arranged beside vibrant vegetables, drizzled with yogurt sauce, garnished with edible flowers Rosie had once called sunshine petals. Just as they finished plating, the kitchen door opened, and Victoria Hale stepped in, unannounced, heels silent on the tiles. Her eyes scanned the plates, the staff, then finally Ethan, who held his breath without realizing it. She picked up a skewer, tasted it slowly, letting the lemon and rosemary linger on her tongue before nodding once. A quiet approval that felt louder than applause. Better than what I had in Dubai last year, she said, setting the plate down. Tony's eyes widened, but he said nothing. Respect replacing skepticism. Ethan allowed himself the smallest smile, the kind that felt like a promise kept to himself, to Rosie, to every moment he had doubted if he still mattered. Upstairs, Victoria returned to her office, pausing by her window to watch the kitchen below, a soft warmth brushing past the edges of her carefully contained world, realizing change could taste like rosemary and feel like courage. The next morning, Ashworth Group buzzed with an energy that felt different, like a silent hum of something quietly hopeful threading through the sterile halls. Employees who usually rushed past the cafeteria paused, drawn by the warmth wafting from Ethan Barnes's carefully plated meals, bright with color and layered with comforting spices. Some lingered longer than usual, exchanging small smiles they rarely shared during their usual caffeine-fueled commutes to their desks. Meanwhile, Rosie sat cross-legged on a plush chair in the lobby, crayons scattered around her as she hummed and colored, her presence like a tiny lighthouse reminding everyone who passed that joy could exist even in quiet corners. Upstairs, Victoria Hale sat in a boardroom under cold fluorescent lights, facing Richard Elms, the CFO, and Susan Fields, the VP of Operations, as they delivered their concerns with practiced detachment. We've noticed deviations from protocol, Victoria, Richard said, fingers drumming on his expensive coffee cup. Hiring a single father with a child on site bypassing standard HR filters, shifting our cafeteria to a wellness model without board approval. We've received complaints, Susan added, about a child's drawings appearing on office walls and employee areas. Victoria's eyes narrowed, the steel in her returning, but not to shield herself from them, from what she knew was right. "You're telling me a child's rainbow drawings are a liability?" she asked, voice dangerously calm. Richard leaned back, shrugging. "They represent a lack of boundaries." Victoria's jaw tightened, memories of her own childhood returning. Of a father who measured love by silence and worth by control, who told her that children were distractions and women could never lead without sacrificing themselves entirely. "Thank you for your feedback," she said coolly, standing and dismissing the meeting without waiting for further protests. She returned to her office, closing the door quietly, her reflection staring back at her in the window. A powerful CEO, a leader, and yet, in the echo of Rosie's laughter, she felt a version of herself she had long buried. Later that afternoon, she found herself standing outside the family flex room, a small, unused office near reception she had quietly ordered converted that morning. Inside were beanbags, children's books, a small shelf of toys, and blank walls just waiting for color. Rosie, with her crayons and bright eyes, was the first to enter, her gasp of joy echoing down the hall as she declared, "It's not boring anymore." Victoria watched her, a lump forming in her throat as Rosie carefully taped her rainbow drawings to the wall, transforming the gray into something alive. Ethan appeared beside Victoria, hands still damp from the kitchen sink, and for a moment they stood together, not CEO and chef, but two people witnessing something fragile and powerful. "You did this," Ethan said quietly. Victoria shook her head, eyes fixed on Rosie as she adjusted the crooked drawings with a proud smile. "No," she replied softly. "She did." And in that small room filled with crayon colors and soft giggles, Victoria Hale allowed herself, for the first time in decades, to believe that leadership was not just about control, but about creating spaces where people could breathe and where hope could take root. That evening, as the lights of Ashworth Group glowed against the dusky skyline, Victoria Hale sat alone in her office, holding one of Rosie's rainbow drawings in her hands. The colors, uneven and bright, bled beyond the lines, unconcerned with the neatness the world demanded. She traced the crayon lines with her thumb, feeling something unnameable crack open in her chest. For the first time in years, she wasn't reviewing profit margins or risk analyses, but staring at a drawing made by the child she couldn't forget, the child she once lost. She pulled open the bottom drawer of her desk, retrieving a leather folder she had not touched in over a decade, its edges worn from the nights she spent holding it, afraid to look inside yet unable to let it go. Inside lay a single birth certificate, the name Rosalie Grace scrawled in faded ink, the mother's name listed as Victoria Demo, her maiden name before she became Hale. She had been only 22, scared, alone, coerced by her father into signing papers she barely understood, papers that promised a better life for the baby she had cradled only once before being taken away. Her father had told her it was necessary for her future, that love was a weakness, that a child would ruin the legacy she was born to inherit. Now that legacy felt hollow. Downstairs, Rosie was asleep on a beanbag in the family flex room, her bunny tucked under her chin, the soft rise and fall of her breathing, a rhythm of hope. Ethan watched her, the weight of gratitude and fear heavy in his chest. Rosie had been his light since the day he met Julia, his late wife, who had adopted Rosie under circumstances Ethan never questioned, only knowing that when Julia placed the baby in his arms, it felt like the world finally made sense. Now, everything was shifting. Later that night, Victoria found Ethan cleaning down the kitchen for the last time that day, the scent of roasted rosemary still lingering. She stood in the doorway, her hands trembling, the folder pressed to her chest. "We need to talk," she said softly, her voice almost breaking. They sat in the family flex room, Rosie's drawings surrounding them like quiet witnesses. Victoria handed him the birth certificate, her eyes glistening. Ethan read the name, the dates, the mother's name, and felt the room tilt around him. "What is this?" he whispered, voice cracking. "She's mine," Victoria said, tears slipping down her cheeks. "I never wanted to give her up. I was forced, and somehow through everything, She found her way back to me. Ethan closed his eyes, memories of Julia's vague explanations, her avoidance of adoption details flooding back. The truth landed heavily but softly like rain. Rosie was Victoria's daughter by birth, his daughter by choice, and now perhaps they were all meant to be a family, born not from perfection, but from the persistent grace of second chances. The next morning, Ashworth Group was no longer just buzzing with quiet energy. It was alive with whispers as a storm gathered quietly around the glass tower. A leak had happened. Someone from the board, desperate to regain control, had released partial adoption documents and blurry photos of Victoria Hale leaving the family flex room with Rosie, her hand resting protectively on the child's small shoulder. Headlines exploded. CEO's secret child, Ashworth scandal, hidden heir. To the world, Rosie became a scandal, not a child. Victoria's assistant burst into her office, eyes wide, phone trembling in her hand. "It's everywhere," she whispered. Victoria took the phone, scanning the headlines, her stomach twisting as Rosie's bright smile appeared beneath bold, cruel letters. She turned toward the window, seeing her reflection layered over the skyline, the hard-won empire behind her, and realized she would burn it all if it meant Rosie could remain just a child, untouched by the coldness she had spent her life surviving. Downstairs, Ethan felt the air shift before his phone buzzed violently with notifications. He stepped out of his kitchen, ignoring the stares of staff who had begun to look at him, not as a chef, not as a father, but as a headline. He found Victoria pacing the family flex room, where Rosie's rainbow drawings now felt like fragile promises under threat. "I'm so sorry," Victoria said, her voice raw, unguarded. Ethan's jaw tightened, but his eyes held no blame, only a storm of protectiveness. "We need to protect her," he said quietly, "no matter what." Victoria nodded, swallowing her fear, lifting her chin. "I'm calling a press conference," she declared. "I won't let them reduce her to a scandal. I won't let her be used as a weapon against the family she chose and the family that chose her." That afternoon, Victoria stood before a sea of cameras, no makeup, no power suit, just a simple navy dress and eyes that no longer hid behind coldness. She took a breath, feeling the weight of every expectation, every threat, every whisper telling her she was not enough, that she would fail if she chose to be human. She let them fall away. "Yes," she said, her voice steady, echoing across the room. "Rosalie Grace is my daughter. She is not a scandal. She is not a mistake. She is not a weakness. She is my greatest truth." The room fell silent, cameras clicking softly like rain. Leadership without empathy is just control. I will not lead without my heart anymore. Upstairs, board members exchanged glances, recognizing the shift that was happening, the change they could not stop. Downstairs, Rosie sat with Ethan, watching the live stream on his phone, her small fingers gripping his hand tightly. "She's not scared," Rosie whispered. Ethan kissed the top of her head, tears in his eyes. "No, sunshine, she's not," he replied. And in that moment, something irreversible and beautiful settled into the foundation of Ashworth, as the building learned that to lead meant to love, even when it cost you everything else. The days following the press conference were heavy with tension, yet something quietly hopeful pulsed beneath the storm clouds hanging over Ashworth Group. Investors demanded meetings, the board whispered of transition plans, and headlines split between praise and condemnation. Through it all, Victoria Hale stood firm, no longer hiding the truth that had defined her silence for so many years. She had not built Ashworth for coal profits alone. She had built it to matter. One crisp morning, Victoria stepped into the family flex room to find Rosie sitting cross-legged on the floor, crayons scattered, a new drawing in hand. It was of a tall glass tower with wide-open windows and bright banners that read, "Welcome home." Rosie looked up, her eyes clear. "I made this for you, Miss Victoria." Victoria knelt, taking the drawing with trembling hands, tears rising. "You can call me Mom if you want," she whispered, voice cracking. Rosie studied her for a moment, then nodded softly. "Okay, Mom." Downstairs, Ethan watched them from the doorway, a quiet smile on his face as the woman who once lived behind steel walls let herself become human in the presence of a child's simple love. That afternoon, Victoria walked into the boardroom, holding Rosie's drawing like a shield. She placed it in the center of the table, looking at each board member in the eye. "This is why we lead," she said, her voice calm and unshakable. "If you can't understand that, then I'm not the CEO you need, but I will always be the leader this company deserves." She walked out without waiting for their approval, stepping into the hallway where Ethan stood waiting. He held out his hand, and for the first time, she took it without hesitation, feeling the warmth of a family she had longed for but never dared believe she could have. That evening, as the city lights blinked awake, Victoria, Ethan, and Rosie sat together around a small kitchen table, sharing laughter and bowls of warm soup. It was not the end of a story, but the beginning of a family born from grace, choice, and quiet courage. Sometimes family is not where you begin, it's who stays, who shows up, who chooses you every single day. If this story moved you, let us know in the comments. What does family mean to you? And don't forget to subscribe for more stories that remind us that love, in its purest form, can change everything.